I have come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass. And I'm all out of bubblegum.
They Live is perhaps the most famous movie that nobody's ever heard of, courtesy of that brilliant line, its striking visual motifs, and its biting social commentary.
It really boils down to our ability to accept. We don't need pessimism.
Most people are familiar with all three, even if they don't know which film they all came from. They Live is notable not only because of its social metaphor, but also because it still manages to work splendidly all on its own as an action film. Most of what passes for social commentary in cinema these days is either so boring you can't even watch it, or so obvious and heavy-handed that you might as well put it on Sesame Street. This post is gonna get a little didactic, not gonna lie. I assure you that it has nothing to do with the fact that my grad school application was recently rejected.
Now they're gonna see what they missed.
They Live follows the story of a homeless drifter, played by wrestler Roddy Piper, who discovers a pair of magical sunglasses that reveal the world for what it really is, a post-alien invasion Earth, controlled by affluent aliens who manipulate the masses through subliminal behavioral conditioning and open hostility against anyone who opposes them. It's an awesome story, which closely mirrors Los Angeles' neo-tyrannical obsession with privatizing and or militarizing formerly democratic space in an effort to disenfranchise and subjugate the poor. What am I talking about? I'm talking about installing rounded public benches so that homeless people can't sleep on them. I'm talking about building public parks but leaving out the restrooms, and installing automated randomized sprinkler systems so that the homeless can only use the parks for brief bouts of prostitution and drug dealing rather than sleeping. I'm talking about the publicly funded shifting of an entire commercial district at the expense of several thousand public housing sites, a process which is then euphemistically dubbed an urban renaissance. I'm talking about the redirection of public transit lines, bypassing downtown, so as to exclude poor people from the more affluent commercial districts of the city. This is more than just poor city planning. This is the implementation of a deliberate, socio-political, spatial design strategy, meant to privatize formerly public space in an effort to banish the poor from the city. To use the paraphrased words of Mike Davis, author of City of Quartz, which serves as the main source for this video. All of this, by the way, is true. This is what the city planners of LA had in mind when they implemented these changes in the 1980s and 90s. This isn't contested, there's no argument here. What I am arguing is that the film They Live is a dramatization of these events. At the beginning of the film, Roddy crashes in a local shantytown, which is under constant police surveillance, the cops being the aliens in disguise. Roddy takes interest in a local church, which seems to be the focal point of the aliens' attentions. Turns out the church is actually headquartering the human resistance movement. But soon after Roddy finds this out, the aliens roll in and bulldoze the town. This is eerily similar to what was actually going on in Los Angeles at the time of the film's release. Pre-millennial downtown Los Angeles was particularly enthusiastic about the destruction and or privatization of formerly democratic space. Fueled by a seemingly endless supply of Japanese and Canadian capital throughout the 1980s, downtown LA was almost completely privatized in all but legislation. Concrete barriers topped with metal spikes went up around the less affluent neighborhoods, and the LAPD threw up roadblocks to prevent inner-city residents from leaving those neighborhoods. Much of the blame can be placed on this asshole, Daryl Gates, who served as the Los Angeles police chief from 1978 to 1992. He's the guy who suggested that the reason so many black people were dying of asphyxiation after being put into chokeholds by his officers was because the arteries of black people don't open as fast as the arteries of, quote, normal people. Even city architects started adopting this paramilitary style. Look at this. This is the Francis Howard Goldwyn Hollywood Regional Public Library. It's built like the fucking Alamo. City planners also did their best to keep the poor out of affluent neighborhoods, designing office buildings linked by elevated walkways so that nobody had to mix with the common folk out on the street. The much touted Wilshire line didn't even reach Wilshire Boulevard until they decided to build an extension in 1996. Homeless people were literally shipped to the outskirts of the city or dumped in Skid Row, where the largely unsupervised Community Redevelopment Agency promptly bulldozed the only public toilet. None of these efforts has reduced or eliminated the homeless population in LA, mind you. In 2012, Los Angeles had the 6th highest per capita incidence of homelessness in the United States. All these efforts did was keep the population mobile. They literally had to keep moving, lest they be beaten off by an overtly aggressive socio-spatial environment. Anybody who's driven down Wilshire Boulevard in the last 20 years will immediately see the effects of all these activities. So Roddy escapes the shantytown demolition and finds the sunglasses, which reveal the world for what it truly is, spawning what is perhaps the greatest 4-minute stretch of nearly dialogue-free cinema in film history. Roddy immediately tries his damnedest to put a stop to the oppression, mostly through open hostilities.
You're okay. This one, real fucking ugly.
But that gets him nowhere fast. He's too weak on his own. So he enlists the aid of a local construction worker, Frank. Frank is not initially receptive to the cause.
You crazy son of a bitch!
In one of the film's most memorable scenes, Roddy and Frank brawl in an alley for over 5 minutes, with Roddy trying desperately to shove a pair of magical sunglasses onto Frank's face the whole time.
I'm giving you a choice. Either put on these glasses or start eating that trash can.
Interpreting the scene as loosely as I'd ever like, I could draw parallels between this and the affluent WASP community's hypnotic obsession with watching the ongoing but significantly exaggerated conflict between rival inner-city gangs. So Roddy finally does get a pair of glasses on Frank's face, and the two of them join forces. Spoilers from here on out. Everybody ready? The end of the film presents a poignant revenge fantasy. Roddy and Frank arm themselves with grenades and automatic weapons and storm alien headquarters. They manage to blow up the aliens' masking signal, which exposes the invasion to the world, but both Roddy and Frank die in the attempt. They Live presents a very simple but cathartic solution to a complex real-world problem. Nobody's actually suggesting something as stupid as taking up arms against the rich. And if you think that's what this movie is doing,
It is.
then maybe you might want to ask your parents if you're allowed to watch R-rated movies. You might be asking what's the value of a social metaphor if it doesn't offer any real-world solutions. Well, movies can't force the world to change, but they can shake us out of our apathy.
People need dramatic examples to shake them out of apathy.
Why is this important? Because the apathy for those that would oppose the status quo is the single greatest reason for its existence. You want to be a real revolutionary? Try optimism. Vote like you give a damn. Great, now I'm starting to sound like Sesame Street.